Coming up on Jerusalem Dateline, Operation Gideon's Chariots. Israel's offensive campaign against Hamas pushes deeper into Gaza while negotiations continue for the release of the hostages. Plus, first in their hearts, Israel's Eurovision contestant Yuval Raphael wins the popular vote. And sounding the alarm, analysis from Middle East expert Dan Diker on the battle between Western civilization and jihadist ideology. All this and more coming up on this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. After weeks of preparation, Israel launched its new campaign to strike Hamas across wider and wider areas of Gaza to root out Hamas control. It begins while hostage negotiations continue. Here's the latest on this and other stories. On Sunday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced the new military campaign.
As we promised, we have launched a powerful campaign against Hamas, Gideon's Chariots. IDF forces are simply entering with force into the Gaza Strip with the dual goal, defeating Hamas and freeing our hostages.
While the air and ground operation begins, Israel announced it's also pursuing every opportunity to reach an agreement to release all of the hostages. One deal under consideration by U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff would include a temporary ceasefire, release of Israeli hostages and Palestinian prisoners, then followed by more negotiations to end the war. Netanyahu also announced that humanitarian aid is beginning to flow again into Gaza with renewed efforts to make sure Hamas doesn't steal it. Israel's Defense Minister Israel Katz says he believes Hamas leader Mohammed Sinwar was killed in an Israeli bombing last week. Mohammed was the younger brother of former Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar, mastermind of the October 7th attack. In another development, IDF International spokesman Lieutenant Colonel Nadav Shoshani posted on X exclusive intelligence revealing a so-called Hamas media platoon, including journalists that took part in October 7th. Back from his Middle East trip, President Trump again rejected concerns of a growing rift between him and Netanyahu. He told Fox News that Netanyahu is angry and has every right to be so after the brutal atrocities Hamas committed in Israel on October 7th.
You got to remember, October 7th was one of the worst days in the history of the world, I think, not just local to this region. It was one of the worst, most atrocious attacks anyone's ever seen.
To talk more about what's happening here in the Middle East and about President Trump's Middle East trip, I'm joined in the studio by John Wagi, CBN senior editor, and Julie Stahl, CBN Middle East correspondent. John, you know, people have been talking about the Middle East trip before, during, and after. Is the U.S. and Israel on the same page? Is there some sort of a difference? What's your sense?
I think the U.S. and Israel are on the same page, but there were a lot of concerns, not only here in Israel, but even among evangelicals in the United States. I know that prayer requests came from there saying, you know, please don't let President Trump, let Israel float down the river, and declare a Palestinian state. None of that happened, really. It was, as it turned out, primarily an economic deal, but there were a lot of people concerned that the United States would oversee a messing around with the borders of the land, and that's something that, especially for evangelicals and believing Christians who support Israel, that's not a healthy thing.
Yeah. Now, Julie, you were on the streets here in Jerusalem, and you were talking to Israelis about their sense of the trip. You know, did, for example, President Trump sort of diss Israel for not even coming here? So what were they saying?
Well, some people said, hey, he didn't even show up. That was an affront to us. But others said, look, it's America. He can do what he wants. He's not our, he's not our governor. He's not over us. He can do what he wants, what's good for America. So there were kind of both sides of things. And I think everybody was just a little bit concerned that, he was going to somehow undercut Israel and not keep supporting Israel. Mm-hmm. Right at the beginning of the week, though, they did get Idan Alexander out, one of the hostages. So, that's a big thing on everybody's mind right now.
And they did that without the help of with the help of Israel, but mainly a U.S. attempt to get, the last living American out.
Right.
One of the other things that happened just a few days ago, it was the Eurovision Song Contest, and Yuval Raphael came in second. John, one of the big things, the story, was the fact that she's a survivor of the Nova Music Festival massacre. Hid for several hours, could have been murdered, and now she's really on a global stage. What did that mean for Israelis?
Well, I think it was a moment for Israelis. It was a cultural, sociological moment. It was a catharsis of, here is this woman who was buried under bodies and breathing at the same time, knowing that if they found out she was there, she'd be dead. And, 590 days later, she's on a world stage. Eurovision is huge in this part of the world. And she shone. And she really shone. And so it transcended politics into the realm of culture, and it was just with a song title of New Day Will Rise. And here's this woman who carries it off flawlessly while there are thousands of protesters outside, people throwing paint on technicians inside. And it was just, and she practiced with boos. She practiced hearing boos, and she transcended it all and won the people's vote by far, all across Europe.
Actually set a record of the people's vote. Julie, what does this mean for Israelis?
I think it's really, really important. And they were so proud of her. And, it is this sense of resilience. We keep talking about it, but it's not because Israel wasn't hurt. They were hurt massively. Like President Trump said, one of the worst things, or if not the worst thing for a long time. And, but they come out of it. They don't stay in that. And with Eurovision, Yuval was not allowed. She wasn't allowed to talk about Hamas or the war or the Nova Festival or the fact that she had been buried under these bodies and rescued. She wasn't allowed to say any of that in an interview or anything surrounding the Eurovision, though people knew it. And so that really, that says something that she could really rise above it, but people knew that. Another thing was her costume was, people said that, it looks like a Batman kind of costume when she put her arms out, though the designer said, I didn't make it that way. But it reminded everybody of the little Beavis boys, little Ariel, and
that's right.
who wore the Batman costume. So there were many ways that she was, just representing the country and so proud to have been there, and just her final words, Am Israel Chai, the people of Israel live. She really could make a declaration.
Yeah. What kind of reception did she get when she came back here, John?
Oh, heroes welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, she really represented, as President Herzog said, she was a daughter of Israel who she shined in the public spotlight. And Israelis not only recognize that, but embrace it.
Yeah.
And and another thing, Chris, that it did, it showed a real deep divide between elites of the world and the people. When people sitting at home voted overwhelmingly for her in this song, they saw an Israeli performing beautifully. When the elites saw it, they thought that they saw it as something that had to be submerged, so they made her 14th place on the list, Not anywhere near the response she got from the public, the world public.
Yeah. Well, an amazing story, resilience, like you said. And I was struck one time by this picture of where she was hiding before she might have been murdered, and then her on the stage.
Yeah.
John, Julie, thanks for your insight into really a cultural moment, as you say it, here in Israel. Coming up, has the U.S. let its own nuclear program diminish? And what does that mean for deterring war? Many Americans assume that the United States remains the world's unrivaled nuclear power. The truth, however, is America's nuclear stockpile has shrunk significantly, and many of the weapons it still has are old. As Dale Hurd reports, arms experts believe American security is at risk, which ushers in a host of other problems.
Since the end of the Cold War, the United States has dramatically reduced the number of nuclear weapons it has deployed or in storage. That arsenal today is roughly 90% smaller than at the height of the nuclear arms race with the Soviet Union. America's nuclear stockpile has fallen to levels not seen since the 1960s, while China has embarked on an unprecedented nuclear buildup. The U.S. only has about 1,700 deployed nuclear warheads, and the newest is over 35 years old. In Asia, since the 1960s, the U.S. has withdrawn its nuclear weapons from Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan. If war were to break out over Taiwan, experts fear our base in Guam could be neutralized in a Chinese first strike, and the U.S. would not be able to respond in kind.
All of this requires urgent action.
Frank Gaffney, the host of Securing America, served as Assistant Secretary of Defense in the Reagan administration, when a strategy of peace through strength and a nuclear arms buildup helped defeat the Soviet Union.
All of that has essentially gone over the side. I can't tell you how frustrating it is to see that we are hoping that nobody notices that we haven't done a whole lot with our nuclear deterrent since I left the Pentagon.
China, meanwhile, has taken a different course, tripling the size of its nuclear arsenal in just 5 years. It's now the planet's fastest growing nuclear power.
I think that they are increasing the size of their nuclear arsenal because they want to use it to coerce others into standing down.
China expert Gordon Chang believes Beijing learned a lesson from the way Vladimir Putin used the threat of nuclear war to deter the West from more direct involvement in Ukraine.
The Chinese saw that this actually works. I think that they will precede any invasion of Taiwan, Japan, whatever, with threats to use their nuclear weapons to get the U.S. not to come to the aid of its friends and partners.
The U.S. military does have new nuclear weapons systems under development. But having dealt with the Soviets, Gaffney thinks China has even more nuclear weapons than the world thinks it has, some stored in its western desert.
They never bought this idea that Ronald Reagan, my old and much revered boss, famously said, which is a nuclear war can never be won and must never be fought. They believe nuclear war is something that can be used decisively.
To counter China, some defense experts believe the U.S. would need to return at least some nuclear weapons to bases in Asia. And the South Koreans in a poll have already said they would welcome that. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
When we come back, enemies among us, sounding the alarm about threats facing Western countries. Middle East expert Dan Diker is one of those watchmen on the walls who's written about the rise of jihadist ideology for decades. I spoke to him at the recent Jewish News Syndicate conference in Jerusalem, and he said that Israel and the U.S. need to wake up to what's happening.
I think that Israel, the Jewish people, and American civilization is at a crossroads now and under direct threat from a convergence of radical Islamist direct action and radical left operatives in the United States. The United States has been penetrated politically, culturally over the last 30 years by this deathly convergence of radical left, what they call the red-green alliance. And it's no joke. It's serious. And what we're seeing on university campuses right now when they call about for the Intifada revolution is a return to Marx, Lenin, and I would even go further than that and say there are elements of Nazi ideology. America, beware, because Israel is the canary in the coal mine.
And you see that with Iran as well, or do you see that with, is Iran's influence as well in college campus?
Iran and Qatar are the primary funders of subversion on university campuses. And let's remember, Chris, university campuses are the hothouses for future political leadership. These are young women and men from 18 to 22, 23, graduate school to in their 30s that are going to be the men and women of the U.S. House of Representatives, of future governments, and civil society and professional service. It is very serious when you see 15,000, according to the latest research that I found from the Heritage Foundation, 15,000 pro-Hamas demonstrations in the last 2 years alone. And that means that America is in danger because they are not demonstrating for a Palestinian state. They are demonstrating for the destruction of Israel and the subversion of the United States. That's why they wear the keffiyeh. That's why they yell from the river to the sea. That's why they yell Intifada, revolution right now. This is an attempt to dismantle and remake America in the image of Marx and Lenin.
Is Western civilization at a crossroads?
Absolutely. Western civilization is under attack. And what the Palestinian leadership has done so cunningly, if I might say, Chris, over the last 40 years. Remember Yasser Arafat in the 1970s being used by and using himself, the Soviet regime, in order to brand America a Zionist imperialist, colonialist power together with Israel. This has been part of the Cold War strategy that continues today, but also uses much more profound acts of terror, as well as cooperating even with Sunni terrorists. Hamas, remember, is a precursor to Al-Qaeda. Remember that the Muslim Brotherhood is an Al-Qaeda precursor and an ISIS precursor. So there is this convergence of terrorism, hybrid warfare in the Soviet-Russian understanding of it, and the Chinese understanding of it, which is the combination of kinetic terrorism and off-battlefield political warfare. America has to wake up and understand. Mark Levine has made the argument. I know that you at CBN have been reporting on this for decades, but it is serious, and it is in America. Look outside your southern gate into Mexico. Look at the cooperation between Mexican drug cartels and the Iranian regime. Look at Venezuela, where only Iranians do not have to have a visa to get into Venezuela. Look at the tri-border area in Latin America, where Iran has poisoned and invaded, penetrated these countries, whether it's Paraguay, Uruguay, Argentina. The Iranian regime is all over Latin America with its guns and its arrows pointed at the United States. And in the meantime, what Arafat did, Mahmoud Abbas did, and now the Hamas did, is trying to front Israel as the issue and divide Israel from its best ally, the United States, in order to distract the American people from its ultimate goal. And that is the destruction and the remaking of the United States.
Up next, catching up with Sandra Hegy and the latest from Christians United for Israel.
Christians United for Israel, or CUFI, is the largest pro-Israel organization in the U.S. and now has over 10 million members. Sandra Hegy, daughter of CUFI founder John Hegy, spoke with us recently about the latest happenings with this important group. Sandra Hegy, great to be with you. Tell us about CUFI right now. Where's the state of CUFI?
The state of CUFI right now really couldn't be any better, and we're so thankful to God for it. We are about to have our 20th summit, if you can believe it, in Washington, D.C. We are just over 10 million members, and we have people that are mobilized, engaged, and active in every single state in the United States of America, across every single age spectrum, starting with Camp CUFI for the littles, all the way CUFI High School, CUFI on campus, CUFI National. There is never a place where you do not belong in CUFI. We meet our members where they're at because we know that this fight is everywhere.
Yeah. Why is this fight so important now, especially after October 7th? And why is CUFI so important after that fateful day?
Well, as you know, Chris, this is not something that we started on 10/8, and this is something that is a part of our fundamental biblical belief. It is a part of our faith walk as sacerdotal, as praying and taking communion. We follow the Bible to the Word, and we believe that God says, I will bless those who bless you, I will curse those who curse you. And post 10/7, our mission has not changed, but obviously the focus has. Post 10/7, we decided as an organization that we needed to do what we could to just start meeting some needs on the ground, in addition to mobilizing our people in America. And so through the generous support of CUFI churches and CUFI itself, we were able to send $9 million in emergency aid to really kind of small frontline organizations that maybe weren't going to be at least speedy beneficiaries of help at the time, organizations that we had worked with, humanitarian efforts for the past 20 years who themselves had lost staff and were going to funerals for the people that were the providers of these services. Our members know that Jew hatred is real because if Israel doesn't exist, then God is not real because you cannot separate the two. Jerusalem is where God has his name. And we must do all that we can because we're biblically mandated to do so, and because if our faith means anything to us, which by the way would not exist without the Jewish faith, then we must do all that we can in order to stand with Israel and her people wherever those people are, be it in Israel or America, and confront and combat anti-Semitism wherever it may be found.
You do a lot of work in Washington, D.C., and you say the 20th summit will be coming up just in just a few weeks. What role do you have on Capitol Hill and with the administration?
It is one weekend a year where our members come together in Washington, D.C., yes, to be encouraged and edified with other believers and to hear from policy experts, but also to advocate with our leaders. D.C. is really the tip of the spear where we get to come together unified, not because we agree about everything, but because we agree about one thing, and that is that America must do all they can to stand with Israel and her people, not to ensure that Israel survives, but to ensure that America survives.
CUFI really has been at the tip of the spear about Jewish-Christian relations. How do you see that going forward?
I have seen now, post 10/7, ways that maybe people that didn't think that we were a friend before, who see that we are going to stand with them shoulder to shoulder in good times and in bad times. And what I hope is that our Jewish friends all over the world also take that message, the power of unity, because we know that the Bible says where there is unity, God's going to command a blessing. Israel is not alone, and that if there is a line to be drawn around Christians and Jews, then draw it around us both because we are one.
The Bible talks about God being our very present help in time of trouble. Sometimes he uses people as an extension of his love. And our next story is about how CBN Partners helped an Israeli family that found itself in a dire situation.
Olga's son, Ivan, was only 6 months old when she noticed there was something wrong with his eyes. The next 2 years became extremely difficult for the family.
Ivan was diagnosed with cancer of the retina in both eyes. Chemo didn't help. Doctors said it was necessary to remove both eyes to save his life.
With medical challenges ahead, the family decided to move to Israel from Ukraine so he would have a better future.
I just wanted my child to see. Here in Israel, they made him prosthetic eyes, and I realized the miracle of God was that Ivan is alive. He's active, he is happy, he is like an ordinary child. We go to the playground, he is in daycare, and people often can't believe that he has no eyes.
Olga's husband works to support the family, and Olga stays home to take care of Ivan and his little sister. They live near the Lebanese border, and now the latest escalation due to war has made their financial situation difficult.
We were thinking about buying special furniture to accommodate for Ivan's limitations, but because of the war, we did not know if we could afford it. My husband doesn't make a lot of money, but we needed furniture that wouldn't hurt Ivan if he bumped into it.
That's when Olga's social worker reached out to CBN Israel for help. And thanks to you, CBN Israel provided furniture and another special request.
I noticed that when we'd go to church, Ivan would really like worship. He would hold on to the piano to feel the music. I understood that he needed to develop this gift, but we just couldn't afford it. And then you gave us this piano, and it was a miracle for our family, especially for Ivan. There was so much emotion when he received it. I have never seen him so emotional in all his life. He was so happy that this was his piano. He hugged it so much. It was just amazing.
Ivan is now practicing the piano at home and continuing to learn to cope without sight in a safely furnished apartment.
The help you provided was a miracle from God, and it's like a good seed that will grow someday. I see how Ivan loves to worship, how he dances, how he sings. He will praise God on this instrument. You've made my son's dream come true. I thank God for everyone who participated in making this happen. It is priceless.
Well, that family has been through so much, and we pray that little Ivan can enjoy music and worship all his life. Well, that's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. And please keep praying for Israel, for the peace of Jerusalem, for the IDF soldiers in battle, and all those caught in harm's way, and that all the hostages will come home safely. I'm Chris Mitchell, and for all of us here at the Jerusalem Bureau, we'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.